Hey, Detoxers! Welcome to a very special episode of the Disinfo Detox. We are very lucky to be joined by the author of Cyber Citizens Saving Democracy with Digital Literacy, Heidi Boghosian. Welcome to the Disinfo Detox.
So happy to be here, Nolan. Thank you.
Hey, it's great to have you, and it's a great book. Fabulous. Thank you so much for writing it and coming here today to talk about it. And I will start with the cover question here. What is a cyber citizen, and how do you think they can try and save democracy?
A cyber citizen is an individual who uses the internet and all their electronic devices, but does so safely, with respect for others, and with the ability to navigate online communities with a kind of intelligence that comes from knowing the possible perils as well as the opportunities. It's akin to a citizen knowing what their government, what the rights of the individual has, and what the government owes its citizens. And I think that cyber citizens must really start to expect more from the tech giants that are increasingly ruling our lives.
Good. And the way you lay this book out, I want to say too, as someone who reads a lot, I love a well laid out book. I think it fits together really well. And one of the areas you start in part one, those chapters in part ones, you talk about kind of the problem, right? And a major part of the problem is this civic and digital illiteracy. So can you talk a little bit about why you kind of drew that conclusion that we were so civically and digitally illiterate?
I'll start by explaining briefly my interest in this topic. Years ago, I worked at the National Lawyers Guild, a progressive bar association that defends protesters and others targeted by the government. And it was during the anonymous days in the around 2010, 2011, when we had a lot of online activists or hacktivists raising attention really to certain social injustices, but doing it in a very tech savvy way. And I realized it's in terms of how we use the internet, it's really about power dynamics, so that we have a few extremely talented and savvy, and there are many hackers and hacktivists who not only want to help in an altruistic fashion in terms of raising awareness of injustices, but also try to go, in many cases, to corporations and other entities to point out flaws in their cybersecurity. And what I saw was the government prosecuting many of these individuals with very harsh sentences under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act when I thought they were heroes. And I wondered, well, if this is our new world, the cyber world, we should praise these people, enlist them, and have them help teach us. So I started with the basics being both cybersecurity and digital literacy, but also civics education in this country. Because in the 60s, as you know, we really started phasing out civics education and favored teaching, preparing students for standardized testing, which seemed really to rely on rote memory and kind of a rigid way of looking at things rather than analytical, creative analysis and thinking on their own. And I think that over the years, a recent study that I cite says that young people, something like 40%, when you talk about democracy, are fine with having an authoritarian form of government, which I found horrifying. But I realized that so many people, adults as well as young people, don't really take advantage, most, in fact, of our rights and responsibilities, both as citizens, and we don't interact with elected officials or our representatives to ask them to demand that they represent us, we the citizens, in ways that we should be represented. And I think that that's only gotten worse as we migrate a lot of our actions online, where the the level of education. We may be savvy with how many devices we own, but we're clearly not up to par in terms of our expertise of the kinds of threats to be aware of and ways that we can protect ourselves.
Yeah, and so that fits nicely because the next part of your book, that's the part I found most fascinating. The way you wove together this story, and I'll let you tell it here, but it really starts, at least the way I understood it, really starts in the 1970s. I forget what you call it, the blending of the mega church and
Mega
I'm
think
blank.
tanks.
Mega think tanks, that's right. And you talked about that blending, but you connected that history of the 70s, which I think a lot of folks who study the conservative movement have talked about the 70s. But you connected that to the trillionaire power of now, particularly looking at the digital tech lords. So can you kind of paint that history for us? I thought that was a really, really fascinating part of your book.
Thank you. I was inspired by the phenomenon that we'll call mega churches in this country. I wasn't really that familiar with them, but then I thought about think tanks, which have been around for more than a century, and which I believe started in the early days to provide information to elected representatives and others to help them guide them in making informed decisions on any particular topic. But over the years, and definitely starting to peak in the 1970s and through modern day, we've seen them shift into very vocal, often partisan entities that really try to shape our attitudes in a more aggressive way than before. So it's not just about information, it's really about a particular ideology or viewpoint that's being put forth. And many of these are conservative. Many of them are hugely funded by so called dark money sources, so we don't always know who's behind them in terms of support. But what I've seen, and others have seen over the last few years, maybe the last 2 decades, is many of these think tanks coming together to form larger associations and therefore very powerful organizations. The obvious one is the American Legislative Exchange Council, or ALEC. ALEC writes model legislation in all 50 states, works very closely, it sort of brings together mostly Republican legislators to draft laws that they then farm out and they can be adjusted state by state. Obvious example being stand your ground law in Florida. And many of their model legislation is conservative in terms of being sort of setting us back in terms of civil rights gains, advances toward equality for all. Uh, and I just realized that now that they have an online presence, that these entities are able to reach a wider audience and to, along with other forms of, say, hate speech or other ideologies online, influence people who may be unaware of their motivations. And also, as with a lot of the things I write about, putting forth rhetoric that's guised in patriotism, freedom, sort of traditional American values, uh, but that belies their often racist, and many of them have white supremacy undertones, some more than others. So I thought that phenomenon sort of mirrored the mega church, which has lots of followings, um, develops an online community, is a home for many people to go to, and can often espouse what border sometimes on conspiracy theories and great misinformation or delusional communications.
Yeah, that's very fascinating, and added to that, something I think is kind of interesting part of the story too is, and this I think fits what we were talking about with civic literacy. I think a lot of folks, liberals and on the left, were kind of comfortable with possibly some of these I don't know, threats to their civil liberties, surveillance, and things like that, when they thought that was people with their same like cultural sensibilities running these platforms, right? They let us share our pronouns. They they're inclusive in this conversation. But what sort of I think happened and caught a lot of those people off guard was all of a sudden the ownership dramatically shifted. Once they saw the political winds were going toward the Republican Party, they shifted policy. You also saw people like Trump and Elon Musk purchase platforms. People like Peter Thiel became much more central figures. He was always central to big tech, but more politically. And so it's not just also that they've figured out like these algorithms and how to use them. It's also they've bought a lot of these platforms, right?
Right. And that goes into the whole power dynamic that I think the early origins of the web, as you know, were to have a very free exchange of information, creativity, not decentralized, not owned by any entity. And we're really seeing corporations vying to control, uh, and with a certain measure of success, what happens online. So I hope that my book can be a wake up call, along with the efforts of so many others in this area, uh, to really dispel the myth, for example, that privacy is dead, that all of this is out of our control because technology has accelerated so rapidly, that we've lost certain protections. And I think that feeds into what big tech and other corporations and certain government entities, that's how they want us to feel. And I think that all of the factors, lack of civics, advertising technology, the growth of big tech, sort of comes together to basically make us feel helpless, powerless. And that's why I tried to make the book hopeful in terms of giving examples of ways that people are pursuing their own forms of digital citizenry that I think are fabulous incentives for the rest of us to take part.
Yeah, let's talk about some of those because that's part three of your book. Talks about solutions, things that people have done or are doing or could do. You want to give us some of those? What are some of the ones that you really think are worth highlighting for the audience? I mean, they're all worth highlighting, of course, but some of the ones that really stand out to you.
Well, in broad categories, I think I sort of listed whistleblowers, the very brave people often working for big tech who have come forward. Frances Haugen, uh, the hacker Mudge, who worked with Twitter after being from the Loft collective in Boston years ago and worked for the government, putting their lives and reputations on the line to sort of expose what's really happening behind the scenes. But then there are grassroots organizations, some very small. There's one group in San Diego that I like a lot called Project Yano that works to teach young people alternatives to joining the military. And why I think that's important is that with the surge of standardized testing, we've also seen, and the New York Times did an excellent sort of expose of this a year or two ago, the rise of junior ROTC in high schools across the country, often enrolling kids without their knowledge. I have a problem with that because some instructors say it's replacing civics, but what it is teaching kids is to defer to authority, to think in a regimented fashion, not question authority. And Project Jano even did a textbook analysis showing that the books they're using in these classes are, kind of decades old, or at least espousing theories from decades ago, gender stereotypes, more deference to authority, and discouraging creative thinking and the kind of analysis that we need in critical media literacy. So that's Project Yano is one grassroots organization in their own way working to educate people about that, doing their literacy study. And many, as you know, digital literacy programs cropping up, independent ones, as well as certain school initiatives. You know, it's happening quickly, but I think that awareness is being raised so that, other groups, one that I love that unfortunately just sort of closed their doors was called Fandom Forward. They harnessed different fandoms, like Harry Potter, and got their members involved in social justice, like micro volunteering, work like that. And there are opportunities to go join something online, contribute. There are, I love hashtag trash bag, which was started by two men who were out hiking and started picking up trash, and it went viral and became sort of a national program. So I think that there's so many opportunities, really boundless, limited only by one's imagination and enthusiasm, to bring others into the fold of reclaiming democracy.
Good. And let me ask you this question too, because this comes up a lot. So I'm a classroom educator. So folks say, okay, you talk a lot about the classroom, but parents are really struggling with a lot of these issues, right? They're debating, if and when their kids should use the internet or have a social media account or get a cell phone. Now we've got AI coming down the pike. So like, what recommendations or materials do you say to parents who are thinking about this stuff, they're concerned and they're just overwhelmed or don't know where to begin?
As soon as a young person is given a device of any sort, or is in their Google Classroom, which, as you know, dominates our educational institutions by design, I believe that we should be teaching, and various ways of doing this. I like sort of creative, interactive ways, but teaching responsible internet use, digital literacy, cybersecurity, appropriate to each educational level, of course. But I think it should be in all classes. It can't be an isolated discipline.
Hmm.
I think parents have a duty at home to tell their kids to watch out for, online predation, advertisements to kids. Um, and I think that I have some suggested activities that families can do. For example, make up your own digital game that you play at home, where, for example, there's a local park that is in danger of being closed in your neighborhood. So come up with little activities, flyering, having a little rally, you know, just make things fun and incorporate them, because tech is incorporated into every sort of vein of our lives. Educational activities made fun but responsible, and there are a lot of games out there that help with that in terms of teaching democracy and safety. So I think that it has to be built into every interaction that families and educators bring to their students and children.
All right. The book is Cyber Citizens Saving Democracy with Digital Literacy. This is Heidi Boghosian. Heidi, where can folks get the book and where can they follow more of your work?
Well, the book is available online. I prefer independent booksellers, but you can get it most places online. And I have a website, Heidi Boghosian, Heidi, Boghosian.com, where I post things like I have a little instruction on building a digital Go kit, things like that. So
All right. Heidi Boghosian, your work is incredible. Everyone should pick up the book. Thank you so much for coming on the Disinfo Detox, Heidi.
thank you, Nolan. Bye bye.
Hey detoxers, this is the Disinfo Detox. If you believe in media literacy for all, help us keep going. Become a paid subscriber at patreon.com/disinfodetox. There's also plenty of free ways to support. You can like, comment, follow, or share. Every little bit helps. Thanks for supporting the Disinfo Detox, where media literacy meets breaking news.